Welcome to the InforMaven AI Update, a podcast for higher education administrators to discuss the practical use of AI and intelligent agents. I'm JD Mosley-Matchett, the founder and CEO of InforMaven, and this month our guest is Dr. Ruth Slotnick, the Director of Assessment at Bridgewater State University. To hear the entire interview, please visit informaven.ai. What roadblocks do institutions face when trying to integrate AI into assessment work? Now you're investigating how to effectively incorporate AI into higher education assessment. But with the technology advancing so quickly, what are some of the biggest roadblocks that higher education institutions face when they're trying to integrate AI into assessment work? And what would you say are some practical ways to move forward?
Yeah, that's I kind of call that the $1,000,000 question right now. I have a lot to say here, so kind of stick with me as I kind of work through it in my own head. But the first thing that I want to clarify is I'm an assessment expert. I'm not an AI expert by any means. And so that's really important as we talk about it today. I've been experimenting with generative AI really since November of 2022. When it first came out, I was all in it to win it. I was like in there trying to, really experiment in the space. But one of the biggest barriers, and it may surprise you, are assessment professionals themselves. We are the barrier. And so how do I know this? We had 264 assessment professionals respond to that survey in which we built in some Gen AI questions. And the results kind of might surprise you that I would say about half of the assessment professionals indicated that generative AI will have a moderate to major impact, yet only 30% were using it. That was one finding. But what was even more surprising is that some of those not using generative AI still felt prepared for its impact. It's kind of like, I know the hurricane's coming, but I'm not yet doing the hurricane preparedness. And anyone who's been through a hurricane, you got to get that, that emergency bag ready, that distilled water ready, your boarding materials ready. And so what the data was telling me is that the assessment professionals knew it was coming, not prepared, and yet felt prepared. So the disconnect was a little odd to me. And, one person noted that they were just going to wait until the AI thing got itself figured out, and then they would get their hands in. Another person said they were just completely fatigued from COVID-19, that they couldn't even handle one more thing, right? Because this was November of 2022 coming in. The survey was 2024, by the way. And so 2 years later, someone's still feeling overwhelmed because of COVID. So these are some real barriers. And so this kind of resistance may not only be about caution in terms of using it. It might be about an uncertainty regarding professional identity. It could be about purpose. I've had numerous conversations with colleagues who have privately expressed concern about the implications of Gen AI adoption. They're asking thoughtful questions about how automated and even semi-automated analysis might change the nature of the work. Could it put us out of work, right? And as Ethan Mullick from Wharton recently noted, the biggest barrier to AI adoption isn't the technology itself, it's the organizational immune system that rejects change. And this perfectly captures, I think, what we may see playing out in the field. But I'm also reminded by something that Mike Kent from AI Literacy Partners, he's so thoughtful, and what he says about resistance, particularly with faculty. He frames this resistance thoughtfully by describing the 5 stages of grief around generative AI and providing this analogy of who moved the cheese, right? In other words, we didn't want the cheese moved, right? Without consultation. And here we are, suddenly it's in our lap. And, the Gen AI sort of took us all by surprise and we were not ready. So to probe deeper on the barriers and also the opportunities, because whenever you talk about barriers, you also have the opportunities on the other side of it. And there's this other national survey that you very nicely mentioned in the beginning. I'm doing with Joanna Boeing, she's from Bridgewater State University as well, and Bobby Joe Grillo Pinelli from Walden University. We have 225 assessment professionals that have already responded to the survey. So we have some early data, and we're looking at barriers, right? And one that's kind of standing out for us is those who have been in the field from 11 to 15 years are the ones who are perhaps most concerned or resistant about AI adoption. And this again is a form of caution that may ultimately limit innovation or even just understanding our use. We just don't know yet. And this is why this survey work is really important. The field of assessment with Gen AI added in is evolving with or without us. The question is whether we'll lead the change or we'll resist it. And it begs the question, why are we so slow to adopt? And of those adopting, what are they doing with Gen AI so we can learn from them? And so the survey will help us understand what's happening in our field. So the first look will sort of close at the end of March, and then we'll do another look in August. So it's kind of a pulse survey. And because this field is moving so quickly, Gen AI and how it's intersecting, we kind of have to do a regular check-in as opposed to, let's do the survey every 10 years. That's just not going to work right now. I also want to take a moment and say, however, I'm particularly concerned about the ethical implications of Gen AI that many assessment professionals are rightly, voicing issues about data privacy, intellectual property rights, the potential for bias is legitimate, all legitimate. And also, I'm closely following the research on concern about cognitive offloading, the concern that relying too heavily on just push the button might actually, have an effect on our analytic skills. Additionally, the environmental impact is very serious. I grew up in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. They just booted up, 3 Mile Island again to fuel the AI, need. It's concerning to me. I was there when, we had a little bit of a leak downstream. That was a long time ago, but still, the environmental impacts are something that we don't always talk about. And then also, we have low-wage workers in developing countries who are doing the training data testing. And this also raises serious questions about broader implications. And even the way I'm talking to you right now is a type of fluency that we all need to kind of work for, and we need to be able to interact and talk with each other. This is just kind of modeling kind of the shape and understanding of what this thing is and how we use it. So any opportunity to build fluency in terms of integration and use is breaking down a barrier in terms of just how we even talk about it. So, these are some, in terms of barriers, I've got much to say, but the other thing I wanted to really bring to the conversation is a study that I did with Natasha Jankowski in 2015. And this is rolling back to 10 years ago. And Natasha and I really pursued this question of what do we do and how do we do it? And what are our skill sets? Has anyone really even just mapped that out in our field? And 10 years ago when I had darker hair and, a little bit younger, we identified these major roles. The first one is the assessment method expert. The second one is the narrator translator. The third is the facilitator guide. The fourth is the political navigator. And the fifth is the visionary believer. So if you think about that in the AI space, what is our role institutionally in bringing in this new tool to our toolbox and how we use it, not only for our administrative practices, but when we go out to the field and we're interacting with faculty, we have to first say, is this space a good space to even bring up the conversation of generative AI? It kind of reckons, goes back to when we would come in as assessment professionals. Is this space a good space to talk about assessment? Is it going to be a lion's den? How do I need to operate in the space? So you're using your political navigator in that space, but you have to come in with your own assessment expertise in terms of perhaps a disciplinary conversation of Gen AI integration. Perhaps it's just looking at application on how to use AI for assessment reporting assistance. So, you can use some of these roles to help you break down perhaps your own internal barriers. If I say assessment practitioners themselves are a barrier, we have to begin to start seeing Gen AI not as a replacement of our expertise, but as a way to augment the skills that we already have. It amplifies how we could potentially work in our institutions and navigate these complex institutional challenges we're facing right now. But we still have to see where we need to prepare for the incoming students and we need to prepare for the outgoing students. And generative AI is on the bookends right now. So, tackling the barriers is a kind of a one-by-one effort by that assessment practitioner, and it starts with oneself.
So true. Excellent synopsis. Thank you so much for that.
Sure.
Please visit InforMaven.ai to hear the entire interview.